New York, November 2013. Singer-songwriter Kathleen Hanna is given the annual Feminist Press Prize by Joan Jett. 25 years after she started out, the punk icon of Bikini Kill continues to embody the woman who revolutionized feminism.
When I say punk rock, I don't mean spiky hair or leather or mohawks or even a specific musical genre. I think of punk rock as an idea. And in 2013, to be putting out feminist books in a world that still very much hates women is so fucking punk rock. Thank you, Feminist Press. Thank you.
For decades, rock was above all a man's world. But 25 years ago, girls started a revolution. If Beyoncé, Gossip, or Peaches can now fill stadiums, openly proclaiming themselves feminists, it's thanks to young American women who in the early 90s empowered girls by calling for a riot. And that's why they chose the name Riot Grrrl, a name which was emulated as far away as a Moscow cathedral.
Самым прямым, непосредственным образом, но также нас очень вдохновляет сама идея панка как музыки, которая доступна абсолютно каждому. И мы были ровно такими людьми, которые не умеют ни на чем играть, но очень хотят это делать и желательно как можно громче.
In 1990, these girls were already rebelling against a society which claimed that feminism belonged to the past.
For me, it's not just a history lesson, although learning about that time period is amazing because they changed so much in the way that the culture of music worked.
The Riot Grrrls dynamited a male-dominated music scene. By playing both the little girl and the whore to get their message across, they blew up sexist cliches. They created a timeless language for young people.
Riot girl never die! Every girl is a riot girl! Stop my falling!
This feminist whirlwind began in a seemingly quiet town on the northwest coast of America, Olympia, the capital of Washington State. About 60 miles away is Seattle, where another musical revolution exploded into life in the late 80s. Grunge, with its saturated guitars and its angry singing. At the time, young people felt rejected by the ever more puritanical government. After Reagan came the warmonger George Bush, the generation gap kept getting wider. The little town of Olympia saw its destiny change in the 70s with the founding of Evergreen State College. A campus unique in the US as it had a totally alternative educational system, which attracted a student population of young rebels. Olympia College soon became a testing ground for artists, a haven for activists and feminists. They found freedom of expression in the aptly named campus radio station, Chaos. It broadcast an unusual show playing exclusively feminine music, Your Dream Girl. The presenter was a young student called Lois Maffio. She had just arrived from Arizona and discovered a thriving community.
Even though Olympia is the state capital, it was sort of floundering around and didn't have a real reason to be. One of the kind of things that happened due to that was it was very cheap to have an apartment or to rent a space or a building or a storefront in order to do your thing. When I arrived in Olympia in 1981, the city itself was very old-fashioned in a sense. The downtown of Olympia could have been the 1950s or the 1960s. It wasn't modernized at all. And the tone of the community was somewhat conservative. And I think the population in Olympia was not quite sure about those hippies out in the woods. Lots of kids that were sort of coming to Olympia to go to Evergreen didn't necessarily want to be isolated out in the woods. They wanted to be in town.
I talk too much, I laugh too loud. People stare at me when I'm in a crowd. They say I'm walking around like I own the whole place. Well, I do. Anybody can have it all too.
The town became a real playground. In reaction to the strict laws which banned under 21s from quite a lot of venues, many alcohol-free places sprang up. Exhibitions and shows were organized in alleyways, warehouses, and even in the back room of a movie theater. From the mid-'80s, Olympia became known as Girl City, as it seemed to be dominated by girls. The female students who lived downtown ran an inventive, committed cultural scene. Among them were Kathleen Hanna and Tammy Ray Carlin, two photography students who set up Reco Muse Art Gallery. It was run by a group of young punks, and its radical programming would play a key role.
There was never this question of like, why would we do this, or can we do this, or we just did it. I think what's really interesting about the time that Reco Muse started, which I think I also see as one of the things that kind of led to Riot Grrrl, was the start of that space, was in the late 80s, there was this really pointed backlash in the media.
Well, backlash is, you know, it's like when there's a uprising, a movement, a period of excitement, let's say for feminism, and there's a lot of work going on, like in the late 60s and early 70s. And then the 80s and 90s come around and people are like, oh, it's all been solved. Sexism is over. That was the big feminist thing. It's not cool anymore. We don't need it, you know. And even anger and animosity towards, you know, feminism and feminists in particular.
We'd have cabarets and plays and spoken word events and rent the space out and have another art show, and then 2 or 3 weekends of bands playing. Nirvana would play, who were just our friends and my neighbors, and that would pay our rent for 2 months.
At the same time, a new style of music was emerging. A rough sound which was born out of punk rock, mixing angst, rebellion, and big guitars, served up by greasy-haired guys. Grunge was embodied by the Sub Pop label in Seattle. Young people loved it at once, but there was a hitch.
I'm sick to death for going to gigs and coming back with bruises and broken ribs because some fucking arsehole beat is pushing.
I'm Allison. I'm Molly. Sub Pop shows are really gross because the girls always get pushed to the back and it's all this like sweaty boy, long hair, beer belly thing in the front. It's just really annoying. It's like girls need to reclaim the scene for themselves, I think.
I don't want to overly diss the grunge or the Seattle scene because a lot of that is where I came from and came of age in. But I think definitely we were feeling that a lot of these guys were kind of being a little raunchy and kind of sexist in their imagery. And it just seemed like kind of sexism in music repackaged for a new era. And we found most of the lyrics and imagery really annoying and cliched, you know, just more like girls wearing next to nothing on the record covers, woo, you know, maybe a little blood on it. Okay, wow, that's cool. So, I think more and more we just started feeling like we had something to say that was different, and that a lot of women had something to say that was different.
I met these two other women who were like, no, let's write about that. Let's make radical feminism, you know, a part of our agenda, part of our mission statement, and not be ashamed of it.
And that's what the revolution is a lot about, fighting those things that keep us divided and listening to each other and not saying, this is what feminism is, or this is what a girl band is, or this is what this is, but just opening up a discourse for women and saying it's really important that we're girls and it's really important that we're doing things, and we're claiming that what we're doing is important.
Bikini Kill made a noisy entrance on the punk scene, marking the first act of this girl revolution. In their songs, the group tackled taboos such as rape and incest head-on, and called on girls to join forces. Kathleen Hanna proudly bore the word slut on her stomach. She performed half-naked, anticipating predictable male reactions to better throw it back in their faces. This radical girl power inspired others, which wasn't to everyone's liking.
There was a history there of women being in bands, so it wasn't like, whoa, what's going on? But there were definitely people who were angry about our presentation and about how outwardly feminist that we were. And as we started playing more and more shows, things got more violent. The fact that we were, you know, bitches, we were difficult women, we were feminists who hated men, we were man-haters, basically, that preceded us to every show. And so when we got there, we were typically treated like crap by every single guy who worked at the club, and it was typically all men who worked at every single club. And then guys would come to our shows specifically to heckle us and yell at us and threaten us.
Here's your shoes, get off my stage. Because we got a fucking right to be hostile. And I'm not gonna sit around and be peace and love with somebody's fucking boot on my neck. All girls to the front. I'm not kidding. All girls to the front. All boys, be cool for once in your lives. Go back. Back.
Girls were literally called on to come to the front. Bikini Kill got across a clear message. Together, the girls will win.
Just her face was red, the veins were popping out of her neck, and she was so intense. And it was so awesome because she was really going for it. And I could tell she just didn't care what she looked like. And it was so important, I think, for girls to see other women just letting it all hang out and not care what they look like and not be afraid of sounding crazy or ridiculous or loud or angry or anything like that. And that made a huge impression on me.
My name is Calvin Johnson. I live in Olympia, Washington. I run a record label. I'm also in a band called Be Happening.
The label K Records embodied this attitude which was so unique to Olympia. At its helm, Calvin Johnson helped to make the town a key place on the alternative music scene. He had many artists play and record there with limited resources. They all had that do-it-yourself approach.
I feel like I'm privileged to be a witness to so much beautiful creative expression. That's the reason that K exists, is so that I get to be in the room when all these wonderful people create, and also just from the beginning of my involvement in music, my main role is I'm a fan.
Olympia was known as a girl city, partially because K Records' musical style was more in keeping with what people think of as traditionally feminine, which is, sadly, amateur and non-aggressive and these kinds of things, and yet still punk. And so there was this idea that people who were more on the traditionally feminine spectrum of things could be punk.
The place we were staying.
Calvin Johnson called us and said, hey, I'm putting on this show set for Valentine's Day. 1991 was the year it was going to be. And he said, I want you to play. What? We're not a band. What are you talking about? I said, well, every time you guys come up here, you brag about your band, Bratmobile, and it's time to play. I guess we couldn't really say no, and he didn't let us say no.
They started playing music and we were super excited because then we were like, oh, cool, we can play shows together and now we have a band to play with.
Bikini Kill was very supportive and cheering in the front the whole time. We played our show, had no idea if this could even be considered music or not.
We don't need no water, we don't need no water, we don't need no water, let the motherfucker burn. We don't need no water, we don't need no water, we don't need no water, let the motherfucker burn. Polaroid baby, you're so white and you're so cute. Polaroid baby, we're so white and we're so cute.
Afterwards, people were cheering and Kurt Cobain walked in the door and we handed him our fanzine and we were all excited and it was great.
I'm no one's little girl. Oh no, I'm not. I'm not gonna be. 'Cause I don't wanna be. I never shall be in your family tree, even if you ask me to. I'm gonna turn you down. I won't mess you around 'cause I don't wanna be.
In 1991, everything accelerated. Bikini Kill and Bratmobile became the leading groups of a movement that did not have a name as yet. They headed for Washington, determined to shake things up, and their timing was perfect. It was the time of protest rallies and marches. The activists of Greenpeace and ACT UP developed shock tactics. Pro-choice movement and anti-Gulf War protesters filled the streets outside the White House. In the spring, a police blunder caused violent race riots in the Mount Pleasant neighborhood. The Capitol was in shock.
Those riots in that neighborhood made a huge impression, of course, also on the punks that lived in the neighborhood and the artists. And people really were talking about it and talking about what's going on in this city that's the nation's capital, where you have some of the richest or most powerful people, yet you have this total disparity of some of the poorest people in the whole country.
And we went to DC, you know, it's already a politicized kind of music scene from Fugazi and Nation of Ulysses, and they were like, we've been waiting for you. We've been waiting for this feminist punk band to show up. That's what it felt like. And they just, you know, opened their arms to us.
They immediately found an audience in Washington, D.C., but discovered a male-dominated music scene. It made them want to take things even further.
The punk rock scene was definitely addressing some of these, like, at least class differences and stuff going on, but didn't seem to be addressing the sexism that much. And so we kind of showed up and were like, all right, girls, let's start talking about this stuff too. So we called a meeting And at the Positive Force House, which is the kind of punk rock, anarchist type house. And I think it was right then that we started calling it Riot Grrrl.
The girls decided to start their own riot. They drew up a resolutely feminist manifesto which summed up their struggle on stage. Their community grew thanks to small magazines in which they laid out their ideas. All over the place, girls were starting to call themselves Riot Grrrls. The girl power revolt was underway and the movement was spreading throughout the country.
Riot Grrrl is just sort of a musical youth division of feminism.
With their music, the Riot Grrrl message burst into teenage girls' bedrooms, an audience that feminism had neglected till then.
Feminists of the 70s had very specifically said, we want to be called women. And that was a wonderful choice, and I'm so thankful for that legacy. But 13-year-olds shouldn't be walking around saying, no, call me a woman. And we started to question, well, what's wrong with being a girl? Why don't we reclaim girlness and amateurness and vulnerability as strengths and as positive things and not as the opposite of?
This is for the Riot Grrrls. When she talks, I hear the revolution in a walk. A revolution's coming in a hip. That revolution in a kiss. Like a revolution. Rebel girl, rebel girl, rebel girl, you are the queen of the world. Rebel girl.
Rebel Girl became their battle cry. The movement went international. In Canada and Europe, feminist groups with evocative names swelled their ranks. Anyone could be a Riot Grrrl. There were no rules or leaders.
Our timing was such that Bikini Kill and Bratmobile had already been playing music, and for a very short time before us, but that amount of time really made a difference. I felt like they really experienced a lot of adversity on tour, and it was really crazy and dangerous. And then because they paved the way, we were able to have a somewhat pleasant, with slight annoyances kind of tour.
There were more and more tours, and very soon the record labels became interested in the phenomenon. To release their records, the girls chose the brand new label Kill Rock Stars that their friend Slim Moon had just set up in Olympia.
Well, I feel really proud that Kill Rock Stars, probably in the whole 15 years that I ran it, it was about 50-50 male and female. And I feel like every other indie label out there, even fairly female-friendly labels, probably are only 20% women or something like that.
Kill Rock Stars released, among others, the first albums by Sleater Kinney and the Franco-German group Stereo Total, and were the first label to support gossip. Today, with the re-releases of old albums and his work as a talent scout, he carries on the Riot Grrrl spirit.
I mean, in this one way, that kind of like, I'm a boy feminist is a political gesture. In another way, it's just like not being an asshole, you know? Yeah.
I think there's a little bit of beauty in the imperfectness of it.
At the time, there was no internet, Facebook, or Tumblr. The Riot Grrrls developed their own means of communication, the fanzine. This small, homemade publication owed its existence to a revolutionary tool, the photocopier.
I just remember scissors and glue stick and just little pieces of paper everywhere.
Inspired by the punk aesthetic of the 70s, the fanzine was a platform for freedom of expression. Using collage and montage, the Riot Grrrls played with the various portrayals of women. They poured out their feelings unrestrainedly, interviewed their favorite artists, reflected on politics, and denounced inequality.
I was like 15, 16, 17 when I was writing it, so I think I was mostly talking about, you know, going to shows and just feeling like I didn't see other people like me there.
Really like people handing it to you and saying like, here, this is a meeting that we're having, you should come. And so that experience of someone handing something, which sounds very cult-like, like, we've chosen you.
This is about splitting, dividing, and cracking, being many and not just one. This is about boundaries. Lines are being drawn, mouths are being shut, bodies are being stopped. This is about control. This is about nausea. This is about silence. This is about being safe. This is about secrets. This is about being present. It's about biting your tongue. This is about longing, the unnamed, and this is about it. It goes on. Amy Carter was Jimmy Carter, who was the president of the United States when I was a young girl, his daughter. And so she was a young girl in the White House when I was growing up. And I think I had a crush on her. It's embarrassing, but it's true. And so it made sense, like in Riot Grrrl, when people were looking at girlhood, and so I was being self-reflective, that I would sort of think about Amy Carter. And there's a picture of Amy, and she's typing, "Dear Tammy Ray, be my Valentine." I was really interested in using the tropes of public lesbianism, so I was buying tabloids, which at the time seemed kind of fascinated with lesbianism. So there would be these coming out, or Madonna kissed a woman, you know. Seems so trite now, right?
I think one of the great things that made Riot Grrrl zines applicable to a lot of people was they emphasized the personal as political. With Riot Grrrl and with lots of music movements, it's the zines that tell the other side of the story. They're just as indispensable if you want to understand what was going on. When I was a teenager, zines were the way to find out about what was going on. Things that you couldn't find out about in major magazines, certainly not on television, and certainly not from your parents. So zines were the kind of thing you would get at a show or possibly a record store, and they would kind of open up your mind and your worldview. That was the internet of my generation's youth. It's a zine meant for women only, for girls. Don't let boys see this zine. And it's made basically to show other girls how they can sabotage boy punk shows. So it's all about like cutting wires and throwing trash and calling the cops on shows if you want to really fuck with people. I think that we felt by making this content that we could change the world. And the fact that 20 years later we are looking back at the content and still as excited about it can be a bit disappointing that maybe we didn't change it as much as we thought we could. The fact that a lot of it is still relevant.
Come on, people now! Smile on your brother, everybody get together, try to laugh.
In late 1991, with their album Nevermind, Nirvana became an instant surprise hit. Not many people know that Kathleen Hanna was behind the title of the album's hit song, Smells Like Teen Spirit, when joking with her friend Kurt Cobain about Teen Spirit, his cheap deodorant. For the first time, alternative music was being played constantly on mainstream radio. For the media, Riot Grrrls became the female counterparts of grunge.
It's curious to me, like I wonder if Nirvana hadn't happened, how big the Riot Grrrl thing would have been in mainstream media. I don't know.
Local and national dailies, music and women's magazines, all the press ran reports on these young girl rebels who fascinated them, even if it simplified the message.
Most of the media made us look stupid, made us look like a fad, a trend, focused on our outfits, had lots of misinformation, and we were really against it.
I mostly remember feeling it overwhelmed, mostly because of like what started happening as soon as like the articles started coming out. I mean, my home address got printed in USA Today. In one way, I mean, luckily, like nothing bad happened, but it was just like, I literally got garbage bags full of mail from like everywhere. Like I couldn't keep it up, and it like lasted for years.
Caught up in the whirl of the media machine, the girls made a radical decision. They decided to boycott the media.
Kathleen called me and was like, this thing is happening, you know, and like, it kind of explained what other people were doing, which was like the media blackout and like just turning people down. And that was like a pretty good way to deal with it, I think, because it's like people took stories and ran with it anyway.
Once the media came in, I think they kind of diluted and distorted the message and took the power of representation away from us. And I think Riot Grrrl kind of started to fall apart at that point.
When you work your ass off to create a feminist punk rock community and then you start feeling kicked out of it because the press has decided to focus on you and people resent you because they're like, why isn't my band getting as much attention as your band? Why are you the queen of Riot Grrrl when we're all contributing? Having my mug everywhere piss people off.
Because inevitably when you say there's no leader, the outside will appoint leaders. So they will decide who is the leader. They will, you know, I think so with Kathleen or other members of Riot Grrrl or other members of bands who were more prominent, that the front person is going to be put in the front.
Going to bands like L7 or 7 Year Bitch and saying, hey, you Riot Grrrls, and they're like, wait, we're not Riot Grrrls, don't call us that. And then the media would really hype that up or trump that up and say, these girls are against Riot Grrrl, and try to pit us all against each other.
We're not alone, there's no scene. There are other bands with women in them, but we don't all hang out together and have pillow fights and stuff. We don't have sleepover parties.
Since the real Riot Grrrls refused to talk to them, the media turned to a singer who seemed to resemble them. What's more, Courtney Love happened to be Kurt Cobain's wife, so she was readily taken to be a Riot Grrrl, which annoyed her to no end.
No, honestly, there's like there's like the same kind of feminism there's always been. There's, in LA, there's girls that get together that talk, have group meetings like there's been since the 60s and 50s and, 70s and 80s. And there's like 10 people that, called themselves Riot Grrrls, and it's just the press. It's a total press invention.
Well, I went to school in Olympia. And everyone's the same. Well, what do you do with a revolution?
Her song Olympia was far from being a declaration of love to the movement.
I think Riot Grrrl not being prepared for the media attention completely makes sense. I mean, that it really germinated, it pollinated out of a really scrappy, punk, zero resource system. Like, why would we think that anyone would pay attention? No one had ever paid attention. It didn't seem like it mattered in the big world, I mean, you hoped that it would in some way, but you certainly didn't think that MTV or Time Magazine would care.
Tu sors, Amandine? Oui, maman. Bon, enfin, qu'est-ce que c'est que cette tenue?
Taken over by the market, the Riot Grrrl movement became a fashion phenomenon to be exploited. Riot Grrrls sell. So, the 90s saw the rise of a cunning blend of pop sounds and pre-digested feminism for the masses, sung by lots of more or less angry girl singers. icing on the cake came when the English music producer spotted the goose that laid the golden egg. And the ultimate symbol of girl power was embodied by the Spice Girls. They were clearly real rebels.
A man with extremely good taste. Have you scored recently?
Got any extra time?
Wanna play ball?
At the same time, the movement was starting to be criticized. It was accused of only being for white middle-class girls. But the enemy also came from within, because as they grew up, the girls no longer all went in the same direction.
Said I'd be blue if I fell in love with you. Fuck your fans! 1, 2, 3, 4! I'm going to kill you! Get out of your fucking scene! You know what I fucking mean! Get out of your fucking scene! I hate your fucking scene! You don't get my love! You're breaking my fucking heart!
I liked the song "Fuck Your Fans." I know it was kind of harsh in certain ways, but to me it was important. It was a document of how I saw this Riot Grrrl and a special kind of girl network falling apart, and how I felt like even though we had this goal of trying to support each other and be feminist and be politicized and all this, not everyone was on the same page, and not everyone was doing the same things, and I felt like a lot of people were kind of just being jocks and cheerleaders, but playing it out in different costumes, and that to me was what that song was about, was trying to call that out with the people who are the most important to me. Just being like, well, why are you acting like a cheerleader? You know, I thought this wasn't what we set out to do, so why is this happening, and why is it okay?
Fight for air, fight for my own air, fight to never know the sickness you know. Fight for a heart, fight for a strong heart, fight to never know the sickness you know. But I know it's my own, gave it a love is the size of these tumors inside us. Love is the size of this hole in the ground where my heart's buried now.
The Riot Grrrl movement only lasted a few years, but it became a very serious research topic which is now analyzed and dissected by academics. At the New York University Library, you can immerse yourself in the movement's relics, curated by Lisa Darms, herself a former Evergreen student.
It's very unusual to be an archivist working with people in their late 30s and early 40s and helping them understand why it's important to archive their past, one, and two, why they would want their personal materials publicly available when that history is still sort of recent to them, as opposed to someone maybe in their 70s who I'm more used to dealing with.
These are the little notebooks that Becca kept on the front door of her apartment in the Martin. And so, I think of it as like before we had cell phones, this is how in a very small local scene, this is how you had to communicate with each other.
An interest in Riot Grrrl now makes sense to me. I think we can learn from the past, and I think that instead of it being something that is in a vacuum, there's like a chance for people to do whatever they want now. And I think it's really good to be a teenager and learn about your voice and learn about how other people have used their voice.
One thing that doesn't come across until you've actually worked in the archive is the incredible intelligence of these teen girls and how articulate they are in their letters to each other. And this is not, you know, although the movement was later characterized as a middle-class white movement, my experience of punk in the late 80s, where I came from, was actually a working-class movement. So I think that, you know, a lot of the women did not come from privileged backgrounds, so that this incredible knowledge and articulation is like a form of self-education. Various logos from over the... I used to have a t-shirt with this on it. The reason that I'm so adamant about the importance of this archive is that activist movements tend to be really reduced. They're really filtered through the mainstream media and what was available on the internet. So it's a very dumbed down idea of what Riot Grrrl was, and there were very few resources to sort of make that history more complex.
What's your song about being on your period? Which I am.
Now 44, Allison Wolf no longer considers herself as a Riot Grrrl, but she continues to make music with the same fervor. Her feminist commitment hasn't diminished either.
We can't just sit here and be quiet. We can't just wait for some other next generation to take over, because where is everyone? No one's, not that no one's speaking up, but I think you have to always be part of the culture and part of creating culture and changing culture and fighting against culture that you don't like.
No one here really gives a fuck.
In fact, she's the person behind the Ladyfest festivals. This radical feminist festival, which began in 2000 in Olympia, has now been exported all around the world. In 2014 in Berlin, Ladyfest brought together girls from all over. Perpetuating the spirit of Riot Grrrl conventions, you could go to concerts of exclusively female artists and take part in discussions on topics as diverse as prostitution, abortion, and sex toys, as well as practical workshops.
I think it's a lot about this network building and finding other people who are interested in feminism, and especially queer feminism. And also to share skills and learn from each other and be inspired by each other.
When I came to Berlin, I wanted to find the feminists, and I knew they had to be somewhere. So I just happened to, I had liked their page on Facebook, and then I saw they were having this open meeting for the festival this year. And even though I've never done anything like this before, I think it's very accessible, and they really make you feel very welcome, so it's really great.
Die Idee ist einfach sozusagen, dass wir das sichtbar auf die Straße schreiben, was auch immer auf dem Herzen liegt, damit es einfach sichtbar ist. Die Leute laufen vorbei, die sehen es, die lesen das. Ja.
Viele sagen, ja, so Feminismus, das ist irgendwie schon angestaubt und eine Sache der Vergangenheit. Man muss sich nach vorne orientieren, aber das stimmt halt nicht ganz, weil es halt immer noch in unserer Gesellschaft da noch einiges gibt, was man da zum Besseren hin ändern könnte.
And to close the festival, the Brazilian band Anticorpos performed their favorite Bikini Kill song.
maybe this claiming your space and being loud.
Riot girl never die! Every girl is a riot girl! Stop boys violence!
Indeed, Riot Grrrls never die. In the late 90s, Kathleen Hanna made a comeback with her friend Joanna Fateman, and suddenly, their group Le Tigre set fire to the world's dance floors.
If punk rock had been deconstructed by, you know, Riot Grrrl, we were now going to deconstruct electronic music and do it in an amateurish, irreverent way. You know, I don't think, though there is a lot of heavy political content in our music, the idea was to have fun and to make something more poppy and danceable.
In 20 years, girl groups have flourished, skillfully crossing over between mainstream and underground music. The original Riot Grrrls, who had to overcome widespread hostility, can be proud. Thanks to Beth Ditto and her group Gossip, the Rebel Girl anthem is now heard by millions of people. A tribute to this feminist punk scene which so inspired it. For it's in Olympia that Gossip started out. The Riot Grrrls' mission of empowerment was a success and gave birth to a new generation of little sisters.
Nothing makes me sadder than when a woman says, "I'm not a feminist, but." And I'm like, well, the fact that you're about to say the second part of the sentence probably means that you are, but you're worried about what it means to have that tag on you. And I think that the meaning of the tag to a lot of women my age won't change unless people make the word mean what it should mean, which is people seeking equality.
I have seen that younger women like Grimes or Lauren from Churches are much more willing to talk about feminism and publicly in interviews, and that makes me really, really excited because that wasn't the case before.
It's part of your culture, you know? It's not like a thing in a book. It's teaching you to make it less abstract and learn about it in real time and apply those things to yourself and women you know and women you don't know. And I think that's how it was helpful for me, was just seeing somebody in a context that I understand, which is like a gig, talking about things that shouldn't be talked about there, but they were, and I think that's probably why it was connecting with people, because it was a lot more human and a lot more, accessible, but without compromising any of the stuff you believe in, just making it like open to people, not making feminism this thing that's only for people that have done this and are smart enough to understand that. It should be for everybody, as all politics should be. It shouldn't just be for people who have had access to it.
Today, the 90s are coming back in fashion. So is the Riot Grrrl movement.
There's this girl. Her name is Lonnie. She gave me this tape and said, "You have got to listen to this."
Thanks to a video game, those who weren't born at the time can now put themselves in the shoes of a young Riot Grrrl, discovering the trials and tribulations of adolescence to the soundtrack of Bratmobile.
I think young people have to discover things on their own terms, with their own vernacular and their own set of interests and their own parameters, that they shouldn't just be interjected into somebody else's cultural dialogue.
The so-called Generation X is still inspiring the new generation, who are adopting all the codes, including the musical ones. The Riot Grrrls concluded their feminist manifesto by urging people not to take themselves too seriously. Their message seems to have a bright future.
Bathwater, sex, contraception. I think I've got a urinary tract infection.
Music is what fuels youth, and if you want to tell the kids that feminism is still very much alive, what better way to do it than on a CD that lives forever?